The first time Maylene's fingers touched piano keys, she was 4 years old. Her mother had taken her to a neighbor's house where an old upright piano sat in the corner, gathering dust. While the adults talked over tea, little Maylene wandered over to the strange wooden box with black and white teeth. She pressed one key, then another, delighted by the sounds that emerged. By the time her mother came to check on her, Maylene had figured out how to play the simple melody of a folk song she'd heard her grandmother sing. "Your daughter has a gift," the neighbor said, watching Maylene's tiny fingers move across the keys with natural ease. 15 years later, that gift had become both a blessing and a curse. Maylene stood backstage at the conservatory's midterm recital, her hands shaking so badly she had to shove them into the pockets of her black dress. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Around her, other students warmed up their fingers, reviewed sheet music, or chatted confidently with friends. Nobody else looked like they might throw up at any moment. "Maylene Chen, you're up in 5 minutes," the stage manager said, barely glancing up from his clipboard. She nodded, unable to speak. The familiar wave of panic was rising, threatening to drown her completely. It hadn't always been this way. Throughout her childhood in the small apartment she shared with her parents and grandmother, music had been her escape, her joy. The second-hand keyboard her parents had saved for months to buy became her most treasured possession. She played for hours after school, losing herself in the melodies that seemed to flow directly from her heart to her fingertips. When she won a full scholarship to the prestigious Westridge Conservatory at 18, it had seemed like a dream come true. Her parents had cried with pride. Her grandmother had held her face between weathered hands and said, "You will bring beauty to the world." But something changed when she arrived at Westridge. Surrounded by other talented musicians in the gleaming practice rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows and concert-quality grand pianos, Maylene began to doubt herself. The first time she played for her new professor, Dr. Abernathy, her hands had trembled slightly. The second time, they shook more noticeably. By her first student recital, the anxiety had grown into something monstrous. She had frozen on stage, her mind going completely blank halfway through Debussy's Clair de Lune. After 10 excruciating seconds of silence, she'd stumbled through the rest, making mistakes she would never make when playing alone. The pity in the audience's polite applause had been unbearable. 2 minutes, Maylene, the stage manager called. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe deeply the way her grandmother had taught her, in through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Out through the mouth for 8. It didn't help. The fear remained, coiled tight in her chest. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not play Chopin." Maylene's eyes snapped open. Dr. Abernathy stood before her, his tall frame imposing in his customary black suit. At 62, his hair had gone completely silver, but his dark eyes missed nothing. He was known throughout the music world not only for his own celebrated career as a pianist, but for his ability to identify and nurture exceptional talent. He was also known for his uncompromising standards and brutal honesty. "I'm fine," Maylene lied. Dr. Abernathy raised one eyebrow. "Are you? Because from where I'm standing you look like you might faint." Again. Her face burned with shame. At her last performance, she'd actually become lightheaded and had to grip the piano to keep from falling. "I've been practicing for hours every day," she said defensively. "I know the piece perfectly." "Yes, you do. When you're alone in a practice room." He sighed. "Your technical skills are remarkable, Maylene. Your understanding of the music is intuitive. But none of that matters if you can't actually perform." She stared at her shoes, unable to meet his gaze. The worst part was knowing he was right. "You're on, Maylene," the stage manager called. Dr. Abernathy stepped aside. "Prove me wrong," he said quietly. Walking onto the stage felt like moving through water. The lights were too bright, the audience a blur of shadowy figures. Maylene sat at the gleaming grand piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, a sense of calm washed over her. This was where she belonged, where she had always belonged. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first movement of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor flowed from her fingers, the familiar notes bringing a fleeting sense of confidence. But then she became aware of the silence in the auditorium, of all those people listening, judging. Her hands began to tremble. She missed a note, then another. The beautiful melody became disjointed, broken. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she struggled to regain control. The room seemed to spin. The piece that she had played flawlessly hundreds of times in practice was falling apart. When she reached the coda, her fingers stumbled badly over the complex runs. After what felt like an eternity, she finished. The applause was polite, nothing more. No one would remember this performance except perhaps as an example of potential unfulfilled. Mei Lin walked backstage in a daze. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear completely. Instead, she found herself face to face with Dr. Abernathy. "My office. Tomorrow morning at 8, he said, his expression unreadable. That night, Mei Lin didn't sleep. She lay in her narrow dorm bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake in her mind. By dawn, she had convinced herself that Dr. Abernathy was going to tell her to leave the conservatory, that her scholarship would be revoked, that she had failed her family and wasted the opportunity they had sacrificed so much to give her. Her grandmother had started cleaning houses 6 days a week instead of 5 to help with Mei Lin's living expenses. Her father had taken on extra shifts at the factory. Her mother had sold her only piece of good jewelry, a jade pendant that had been in the family for generations. The thought of returning home in disgrace made her physically ill. At precisely 8 o'clock, she knocked on Dr. Abernathy's office door, her stomach in knots. "Come in," he called. His office was lined with bookshelves filled with music theory texts, biographies of great composers and stacks of sheet music. Awards and framed concert programs covered one wall. The grand piano in the corner probably cost more than her parents' entire apartment. Dr. Abernathy gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. He studied her for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Do you know why I accepted you into my studio, Mei Lin?" he finally asked. She swallowed hard. "Because of my audition recording," he nodded. "I receive hundreds of audition recordings every year from talented young pianists. Most of them are technically proficient. Some are even exceptional." He leaned forward. "But yours was different. There was something in the way you played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor that made me stop everything I was doing and listen. It wasn't just skill. It was soul." Mei Lin looked down at her hands, those same hands that had failed her so completely yesterday. "What happened to that pianist?" Dr. Abernathy asked. "Where is she hiding?" "I don't know," Mei Lin whispered. "When I'm alone, the music just flows, but when people are watching, I can't be that person." Dr. Abernathy was silent for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the conservatory's courtyard where students hurried to morning classes. "The scholarship committee will be reviewing all first-year students at the winter showcase," he said, his back still to her. "Their evaluations determine whether financial aid continues into the spring semester." Mei Lin's heart sank. The winter showcase was in 3 weeks. There was no way she could overcome her performance anxiety by then. "I can't recommend your scholarship be continued if you perform the way you did yesterday," he continued. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "My family can't afford the tuition. I'll practice more, This isn't about practice." Dr. Abernathy turned to face her. "You could practice 24 hours a day and still freeze on stage. You need to find a way to silence whatever voice is telling you that you don't belong here." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "How?" For the first time, his stern expression softened slightly. "That's something each musician must discover for themselves. But you don't have much time. The winter showcase is your last chance to prove you deserve your place here." As Mei Lin left his office, the weight of his words pressed down on her like a physical burden. 3 weeks to save her future. 3 weeks to find the courage that had abandoned her. 3 weeks to become the pianist she was when no one was listening. Walking across the campus, past the practice rooms where music spilled out from under closed doors, she made a silent promise to herself and to her family back home. Somehow, she would find a way. But the question that haunted her was whether it was already too late. For the next 3 days, Mei Lin barely left the practice rooms. She arrived when the building opened at 6 in the morning and stayed until security asked her to leave at midnight. Her fingers moved mechanically over the keys as she played through the most challenging pieces in her repertoire. Liszt's La Campanella, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. If technical difficulty was the problem, she would overcome it through sheer determination. If she could master these monstrous compositions, surely her anxiety would fade away. But deep down, she knew her problem had nothing to do with technical skill. On the fourth day, her roommate Zoe cornered her in their dorm room. "You look terrible," Zoe said bluntly, her cello case propped against the wall behind her. "When was the last time you ate something other than vending machine food?" Maylin shrugged. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You're making yourself sick." Zoe sat on the edge of Maylin's bed. "Talk to me, please." Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the genuine concern in Zoe's eyes, but suddenly the words came pouring out. Maylin told her about Dr. Abernathy's ultimatum, about the scholarship review, about her family's sacrifices, and the crushing pressure she felt every time she sat down at a piano with others watching. "I can't go home a failure," she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how to fix this." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Have you tried playing something simple?" Maylin looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean? Maybe you're putting too much pressure on yourself with these incredibly difficult pieces. What if you played something easier? Something that feels like second nature?" Dr. Abernathy would never approve of that for the showcase. "The other students will be playing Chopin ballads and Liszt concertos." "Forget what the others are playing," Zoe said. "This is about you finding your confidence again." The idea stuck with Maylin as she headed to her weekly lesson with Dr. Abernathy the next day. She hadn't made any real progress despite her marathon practice sessions. If anything, her playing had become more mechanical, less connected to the music itself. Dr. Abernathy listened to her play through Beethoven's Hammer Clavier with a deepening frown. When she finished, he closed the fallboard over the keys with a decisive snap. "What are you doing, Maylin?" She blinked in surprise. "Practicing. I said you needed to find your voice, not bury it under the most technically demanding music in the piano repertoire." He shook his head. "This isn't you. You're playing like you're at war with the piano, not in communion with it." Heat crept into her cheeks. "I thought if I could master these pieces, and this isn't about mastery. It's about connection." Dr. Abernathy pulled a slim volume of sheet music from his shelf and placed it on the piano. "Chopin's Preludes, Opus 28. Maylin stared at the book in confusion. These were relatively simple pieces, often assigned to intermediate students. Some were less than a page long. "Turn to the E minor Prelude," Dr. Abernathy instructed. She did as he asked. The piece was indeed brief, just 25 measures with a straightforward melody over arpeggiated chords in the left hand. She could probably sight-read it perfectly. "This is what you'll play for the winter showcase," Dr. Abernathy said. Maylin looked up sharply. But it's so simple, is it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Play it for me." Feeling slightly insulted, Maylin began to play. The piece was in a slow tempo marked sostenuto. The melody was hauntingly beautiful in its simplicity, a kind of melancholy song above gentle, rolling chords. She finished quickly. The entire prelude took less than 2 minutes to perform. "Again," Dr. Abernathy said, "but this time listen to what you're playing." Confused, Maylin played it again. This time she paid more attention to the music itself, to the way the melody seemed to float above the accompaniment, to the subtle shifts in harmony that created moments of tension and release. "Better," Dr. Abernathy said when she finished, "but you're still just playing notes. You haven't found the heart of the piece yet." "The heart?" He sat down beside her on the bench. "Chopin wrote this after experiencing a great personal loss. Some call it the farewell prelude. Listen." He played the opening measures, and somehow in his hands the simple melody became something profoundly moving, filled with quiet grief and tender remembrance. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "It's not about technical difficulty. It's about emotional honesty." Maylin nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "You've been hiding behind complexity," Dr. Abernathy continued, "using technical challenges as a shield. But this piece leaves nowhere to hide. It demands that you reveal something of yourself. But at the showcase you will play this prelude," he said firmly. "Not to impress anyone with technical fireworks, but to move them with musical truth." He closed the book and handed it to her. "Just play this simple tune. That's your assignment." As Maylin left his office, clutching the slim volume of Chopin Preludes, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. On one hand, she could play this piece in her sleep. On the other hand, Dr. Abernathy was asking for something far more difficult than fast fingers and perfect rhythm. He was asking her to be vulnerable. In her next practice session, Maylin worked exclusively on the E minor Prelude. At first, she approached it the way she approached all new music, analyzing its structure, working out fingerings, memorizing it measure by measure. But after an hour, she realized this methodical approach was missing the point entirely. This wasn't about getting every note perfect. It was about finding the emotional core of the music and making it her own. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what Chopin might have felt while composing this piece. What kind of loss had inspired such quiet sorrow? What memories had he been saying farewell to? Unbidden, an image of her grandmother came to mind, sitting by the window in their small apartment, humming softly while mending clothes, her hands gnarled with arthritis but still graceful. The gentle resilience in her eyes when she spoke of leaving her homeland decades ago, of starting over in a strange country with nothing but hope and determination. Mei Lin began to play again, this time thinking of her grandmother's stories, of partings and beginnings, of things lost and found. The simple melody took on new meaning, becoming a vessel for her own emotions. When she finished, she was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. For the next 2 weeks, Mei Lin continued to work on the prelude, approaching it differently each day. Sometimes she played it thinking of her family's sacrifices. Other times she channeled her own fears about failing, about disappointing those who believed in her. Each time the piece sounded different, richer, more nuanced, more personal. Zoe noticed the change in her playing one evening when passing by her practice room. "That was beautiful," she said, poking her head in. "What was it?" "Chopin's Prelude in E minor," Mei Lin replied. "It's what I'm playing for the showcase." Zoe looked surprised. "Really? Not one of those monster pieces you were killing yourself over?" Mei Lin shook her head. "Dr. Abernathy assigned this one specifically." "Smart man," Zoe said with a smile. "It suits you." As the showcase drew nearer, Mei Lin's anxiety began to return. What if the scholarship committee wasn't impressed by such a simple piece? What if they thought she wasn't challenging herself enough? What if they decided she wasn't worth investing in? 3 days before the showcase, she went to Dr. Abernathy's office hours, the sheet music clutched in her hand. "I'm worried," she admitted as soon as she sat down. "Everyone else will be playing much more impressive pieces. What if the committee thinks I'm not good enough?" Dr. Abernathy regarded her thoughtfully. "Do you know why I chose this piece for you?" She shook her head. "Because when you play it, really play it, not just the notes but the meaning behind them, it reveals more about you as an artist than any technical showpiece ever could." He leaned forward. "Music isn't about impressing people, Mei Lin. It's about moving them, about making them feel something genuine. But the scholarship will be decided by people who understand this truth." He finished for her. "Trust me. Trust yourself." The night before the showcase, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, imagining all the ways her performance could go wrong. What if her hands shook again? What if her mind went blank? What if, despite the simplicity of the piece, she still froze under the pressure? At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and slipped out of her dorm room, careful not to wake Zoe. The practice building would be locked, but she knew that the old upright piano in the student lounge in her dorm's basement was available 24 hours. The basement was deserted at this hour. Mei Lin sat at the battered piano, its keys yellowed with age, several of them chipped. It was nothing like the gleaming grands in the recital halls, but somehow, its imperfections made it less intimidating. She began to play the Chopin Prelude, her fingers finding the keys in the dim light. Without thinking about technique or perfection, she simply played from her heart, imagining she was back in her parents' apartment, playing for her grandmother. The janitor found her there at dawn, still playing the same piece over and over, each time with subtle differences in timing, in touch, in emotional shading. "That's real pretty," he said, startling her. "Sad, but in a good way, you know?" Mei Lin nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be in your way." "No bother," he said, leaning on his mop. "Reminds me of something my mother used to play back in the old country." She wasn't fancy trained or nothing, but when she played, people listened. Something about his words calmed the storm of anxiety inside her. People listened, not because her mother was technically perfect, but because she played with heart. As Mei Lin walked back to her room in the pale morning light, she felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened at the showcase, she would play with honesty. She would play the simple tune Dr. Abernathy had assigned her, not to impress anyone, but to share something real, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The day of the winter showcase arrived with a heavy snowfall that blanketed the conservatory campus in white. Maylin stood by her dorm window, watching the flakes drift past, each one unique and perfect. In a few hours, she would perform in front of the scholarship committee, her future hanging in the balance. "You ready?" Zoe asked, pulling on a thick sweater. Maylin nodded, though her stomach was tied in knots. "As ready as I'll ever be. Want to run through it one more time? I can sneak you into the cello practice rooms." "No," Maylin said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I think I've practiced enough," Zoe smiled. "Look at you, all confident." But confidence wasn't exactly what Maylin felt. Rather, it was a strange sense of acceptance. She had worked with the Chopin prelude until it felt like part of her, until she could play it with her eyes closed, with her heart open. Whatever happened now was beyond her control. The student performers were required to arrive 3 hours before the showcase began for sound checks and final preparations. Maylin made her way through the snow to the recital hall, the slim volume of Chopin preludes tucked safely in her bag. All around her, other students hurried across campus, instruments cases slung over their shoulders, faces tense with pre-performance nerves. Backstage was chaos. A violinist frantically rosined her bow while running through difficult passages under her breath. A clarinetist dismantled his instrument to check for problems with the keys. 2 pianists argued over who would get the last half hour of practice time on the backstage upright. Maylin found a quiet corner and sat with her sheet music, though she no longer needed it. The notes of the E minor prelude were engraved in her memory. Instead of playing through it physically, she performed it in her mind, feeling each note, each shift in emotion, each subtle change in tempo and dynamics. Nervous? She looked up to see Pavel, a brilliant pianist from Russia who was also in Dr. Abernathy's studio. His talent was intimidating. He could tear through the most challenging pieces with seeming effortlessness. Rumor had it he was playing Rachmaninoff's 3rd piano concerto for the showcase. "A little," she admitted. He nodded. "Everyone is nervous. Even me." He sat beside her. "What are you playing?" "Chopin's prelude in E minor." Pavel raised his eyebrows. "That's unexpected. It's very simple." The comment stung, but Maylin tried not to show it. "Dr. Abernathy assigned it specifically." "Ah." Pavel nodded as if this explained everything. "He is wise, that one. He sees things in people." He stood up. "Good luck, Maylin." As Pavel walked away, Maylin wondered what Dr. Abernathy had seen in her that led him to assign such a simple piece. Did he think she couldn't handle something more challenging? Or was there something else, something she still hadn't fully grasped? The showcase began at 7 o'clock sharp. The recital hall filled with faculty, students, and the mysterious scholarship committee, a group of donors and administrators who would decide the fate of many first-year students tonight. Maylin was scheduled to perform in the middle of the program, after a flutist and before a string quartet. From backstage, she listened as performer after performer took the stage. The level of playing was exceptionally high, even by the conservatory's standards. The flutist before her performed a dazzling piece by Paganini that left the audience buzzing with appreciation, and then it was her turn. "Our next performer is Maylin Chen." "Piano," the announcer said. Maylin's heart pounded as she walked onto the stage. The grand piano waited for her, its lid raised to project the sound, its black surface reflecting the stage lights. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap, taking a moment to steady her breathing. The audience was a sea of shadowy figures beyond the bright lights. Somewhere out there sat Dr. Abernathy, the scholarship committee, her fellow students, people who would judge her, evaluate her, decide if she was worthy. Her hands began to shake. The familiar panic rose inside her chest, threatening to choke her. For a terrible moment, she thought she might flee the stage again, might give in to the fear that had haunted her since she arrived at Westridge. Then, from somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard the janitor's voice. "Reminds me of something my mother used to play. When she played, people listened." Maylin closed her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. She didn't announce her piece. The program notes would tell the audience what she was playing. Instead, she took one more deep breath and began. The opening notes of the E minor prelude filled the hall. Simple, haunting, filled with quiet yearning. Maylin let the melody flow from her fingers as naturally as breathing, each note connecting to the next like words in a sentence, telling a story of longing and memory. As she played, something strange happened. The audience faded from her awareness. The scholarship committee, Dr. Abernathy, her fellow students all disappeared. There was only the music, only this moment of connection between herself and Chopin's simple, profound creation. Without consciously deciding to, she began to shape the piece differently than she had in practice. She lingered slightly longer on certain notes, emphasizing their poignancy. She let the left-hand arpeggios rise and fall like gentle waves, supporting but never overwhelming the melody. She found moments of light within the melancholy, brief glimmers of hope amid the farewell. Memories flowed through her as she played. Her grandmother's hands showing her how to make dumplings, the same hands that had once played piano in a distant homeland. Her mother's face, tired after a long day of work but still lighting up with joy when Mei Lin played for her. Her father's quiet pride when she received her scholarship letter. The music became a vessel for these memories, these feelings too deep for words. The simple tune transformed into something profound under her fingers, not through technical flourishes or dramatic gestures, but through honesty, through emotional truth. When she played the final chord, letting it fade slowly into silence, Mei Lin was surprised to find tears on her cheeks. She had forgotten where she was, forgotten that she was performing. For those 2 minutes, she had simply been living inside the music. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Had she failed? Had her interpretation been too personal, too different from what was expected? Had the simplicity of the piece disappointed the committee? Then came a sound, soft at first, then growing. A single person clapping, joined by another, then another, until the entire hall filled with applause. It wasn't the polite, obligatory applause she had received after her previous performances. This was something else, something warmer, more genuine. Mei Lin opened her eyes and stood, bowing as she had been taught. Through the stage lights she could make out faces now, some with expressions of surprise, others with smiles, a few even wiping away tears. As she left the stage, her legs felt wobbly, but not from fear. She felt oddly empty, as if she had poured every bit of herself into those 2 minutes of music. Dr. Abernathy was waiting in the wings. His face gave nothing away, but she thought she saw a glimmer of something in his eyes. Pride, perhaps, or satisfaction. That, he said quietly, is why I chose that piece for you. Before she could respond, he was gone, slipping back into the audience for the next performance. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. Mei Lin sat in the performers section, barely registering the string quartet that followed her or Pavel's truly impressive performance of the Rachmaninoff. She felt drained yet strangely peaceful, as if some inner battle had finally been resolved. After the final performer, the director of the conservatory gave a brief speech, thanking the audience for their support and the scholarship committee for their dedication to nurturing young talent. The performers were invited to a reception in the main lobby, where they could mingle with faculty and committee members. Mei Lin hung back, suddenly shy again. What if her performance hadn't been enough? What if the committee had found it too simple, too unimpressive compared to the technical fireworks of other students? As she hesitated by the stage door, someone touched her arm. It was the janitor she had met in the dorm lounge, dressed in a clean uniform, his gray hair neatly combed. I came to see you play, he said. Hope that's okay. Of course, Mei Lin said, surprised. Did you like it? The old man's eyes crinkled at the corners. Like it? Young lady, you made an old man cry. Reminded me of my mother, like I said before. She played that same piece, you know. Not on a fancy piano like that one, just an old upright we had in our living room back in Warsaw. Your mother was Polish? Mei Lin asked, making the connection. Like Chopin? He nodded. She played his music all the time. Said it was the sound of our homeland. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. When the war came, we had to leave everything behind. The piano, our home, everything. But she carried the music inside her. He tapped his chest. Just like you do. I don't know about that, Mei Lin said, feeling her cheeks warm. I'm still learning. We're all still learning, the janitor said with a smile. But some things can't be taught. The way you played tonight, that comes from in here. He tapped his chest again. That's a gift. As the janitor walked away, Mei Lin felt a strange new confidence blooming inside her. For the first time since coming to Westridge, she felt like she belonged, not because of her technical skills or her scholarship, but because she had found her own voice in the music. She took a deep breath and walked toward the reception, ready to face whatever came next. The reception following the showcase buzzed with excitement. Students in formal attire clustered around high tables, balancing small plates of appetizers while chatting nervously with faculty members and the mysterious scholarship committee. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter floated above the general murmur, and in the background, a string quartet played soft classical music. Mei Lin stood just inside the entrance, feeling oddly detached from the scene. The emotional intensity of her performance had left her drained yet somehow lighter, as if she had shed a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. "There you are." Zoe appeared at her side, eyes bright with excitement. "Where did you disappear to? Everyone's talking about your performance." "They are?" Mei Lin asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "Are you kidding? Pavel is practically having a meltdown." Zoe grinned. "He played Rachmaninoff perfectly, not a single wrong note, and yet people keep talking about your Chopin. It's driving him crazy." The thought was so unexpected that Mei Lin laughed. "That can't be true. It absolutely is. Come on." Zoe took her arm. "Professor Liu wants to talk to you." Professor Liu taught music theory and was known for her exacting standards and sparse praise. She was also, Mei Lin knew, on the scholarship committee. As Zoe led her through the crowd, Mei Lin felt her newfound confidence wavering. What if the committee had already decided against her? What if, despite the applause, they didn't believe she was challenging herself enough? Professor Liu stood near the grand piano that had been moved to the reception hall, deep in conversation with two older men in expensive suits. When she spotted Mei Lin, she waved her over. "Ah, here she is," Professor Liu said. "Gentlemen, this is Mei Lin Chen, the pianist I was telling you about. Mei Lin, these are Mr. Thorndike and Mr. Watanabe from the scholarship committee." Mei Lin bowed slightly, her heart pounding. "It's an honor to meet you." Mr. Watanabe, a distinguished-looking Japanese man with silver temples, regarded her with interest. "Your Chopin was most moving, Miss Chen. So different from what we usually hear at these showcases. Different good or different bad?" The question slipped out before Mei Lin could stop herself. The three adults laughed, breaking the tension. "Definitely different good," Mr. Thorndike said. "Most students try to impress us with the most technically demanding pieces they can manage. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You reminded us why we listened to music in the first place." Mei Lin felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, sir. Was the E minor prelude your choice?" Mr. Watanabe asked. "Or did Dr. Abernathy suggest it?" "He assigned it to me," Mei Lin admitted. "At first I thought he was— Well, I thought he didn't believe I could handle something more difficult." Professor Liu's eyes twinkled. "And now?" "Now I think it was the hardest piece I've ever played," Mei Lin said honestly. "Not technically, but—" She touched her heart. The three committee members nodded in understanding. "Well, Miss Chen," Mr. Thorndike said, "we look forward to hearing more from you in the spring semester." It took a moment for his words to sink in. The spring semester. They were expecting her to stay. Did that mean— As if reading her thoughts, Professor Liu smiled. "The official notifications won't go out until next week, but I think it's safe to say your scholarship is secure." Relief washed over Mei Lin like a warm wave. She wouldn't have to go home in shame. She wouldn't have to tell her parents that their sacrifices had been for nothing. She could continue her studies, continue growing as a musician. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll work even harder next semester." "Work differently, perhaps," Mr. Watanabe suggested gently. "But I'm not sure harder is what you need." As the conversation shifted to other topics, Mei Lin excused herself, feeling slightly overwhelmed. She needed a moment alone to process everything that had happened. She slipped through a side door into a small courtyard where a stone fountain, now frozen for the winter, stood covered in snow. The cold air felt good against her flushed face. Above her, stars pierced the clear night sky, impossibly bright and distant. Mei Lin took a deep breath, watching it fog in the winter air. "Hiding from your admirers?" She turned to see Dr. Abernathy standing in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the light from inside. "Just getting some air," she said. He joined her by the frozen fountain, his hands deep in the pockets of his overcoat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I think I understand now," Mei Lin finally said. "Why you assigned me that piece." Dr. Abernathy raised an eyebrow. "Do you? You wanted me to stop hiding behind technical difficulties, to find the emotional core of the music instead of just playing the notes." He nodded slowly. "That was part of it. What was the other part?" Dr. Abernathy looked up at the stars. Do you know why I became a musician, Maylin? The question surprised her. In all the months she had been his student, Dr. Abernathy had never shared anything personal about himself. No, she admitted. I was 10 years old. My father took me to a concert, my first classical concert. The pianist was Vladimir Ashkenazy. He pronounced the name with reverence. He played Chopin's Ballade No. 1, a piece of extraordinary technical demands. Maylin nodded. She knew the piece well. It was one of the most challenging in the piano repertoire. But what I remember most vividly, Dr. Abernathy continued, wasn't the difficult passages. It was a simple, quiet section in the middle. Just a few chords, a whisper of melody. In those few measures, I felt something I had never felt before. A direct connection to another human being's soul, across time and space. He turned to look at her. That's what music is for, Maylin, not to impress, but to connect. That's what I felt tonight, she said softly. When I was playing, like I wasn't alone anymore. Exactly. There was a rare warmth in his voice. That's what I saw in your audition recording, that capacity for connection. But somehow when you came here, you lost it. You became so focused on proving yourself, on not failing, that you forgot why you play music in the first place. Maylin thought about her endless hours of practice, her obsession with technical perfection, her fear of judgment. I got lost, she admitted. Many do. The pressure of a place like this can be overwhelming. The competition, the expectations. Dr. Abernathy sighed. I assigned you the E minor prelude because I wanted to strip away all the distractions. No technical fireworks to hide behind. Just you and the music having an honest conversation. A comfortable silence fell between them. In the distance, Maylin could hear the muffled sounds of the reception continuing inside. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. What happens now? She asked. Now, Dr. Abernathy said, the real work begins. The next morning, Maylin woke early, feeling strangely energized despite the late night. The relief of knowing her scholarship was secure, mingled with a new sense of purpose. As Dr. Abernathy had said, the real work was just beginning. She dressed quickly and headed to the practice rooms, eager to continue her musical journey. But as she approached the music building, she saw a small crowd gathered in the lobby, looking at something posted on the bulletin board. What's going on? She asked a clarinet player she recognized from orchestra. They just posted the spring semester special performance opportunities, he replied. There's some big deal piano competition in New York and they're sending 3 students from Westridge. Maylin's heart skipped. Special performance opportunities were highly coveted. Chances to perform outside the conservatory, to be heard by a wider audience, to make connections in the professional music world. She made her way to the bulletin board and scanned the notice. The New York International Piano Competition was indeed prestigious, open only to pianists between the ages of 18 and 25. The prize included a significant cash award and a concert tour of major cities. At the bottom of the notice was a list of the 3 Westridge students selected to compete. Pavel's name was there, of course, and another graduate student known for his brilliant technique, and incredibly Maylin Chen. She stared at her name, certain there must be some mistake. She had just nearly lost her scholarship. How could she possibly have been selected for such an honor? Congratulations. She turned to find Pavel standing beside her, his expression unreadable. There must be a mistake, she said. Pavel shook his head. No mistake, Dr. Abernathy fought for you in the faculty meeting. Said you had something the rest of us are still trying to find. A complicated mix of emotions crossed his face. Respect, jealousy, confusion. After your performance last night, no one argued with him. As Pavel walked away, Maylin turned back to the notice, still trying to process this unexpected turn of events. The competition was in just 6 weeks. Participants were required to prepare a full recital program, including works from the Baroque, classical, romantic, and modern periods. It was a tremendous opportunity, and a tremendous challenge. She would need to prepare more music in the next 6 weeks than she had in the entire fall semester. The pressure would be enormous. Suddenly, Maylin felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the first stirrings of anxiety. What if she couldn't handle it? What if she froze on stage again? This time in front of judges from around the world. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, remembering the feeling she had experienced during her performance of the Chopin prelude. That sense of connection, of speaking directly from her heart through the music. That was what Dr. Abernathy had seen in her. That was what he believed made her special, worthy of this opportunity. Not her technical skills, but her ability to communicate something genuine through music. With newfound determination, Mei Lin headed for the practice rooms. She had 6 weeks to prepare for the biggest performance of her life. 6 weeks to prove that her breakthrough with the Chopin prelude wasn't a fluke. 6 weeks to discover if she truly had what it took to be not just a pianist, but an artist. The 6 weeks leading up to the New York International Piano Competition passed in a blur of intense preparation. Mei Lin worked harder than she ever had before, arriving at the practice rooms when they opened and leaving only when security ushered her out at night. Her program took shape: Bach's Prelude and Fugue in D minor, Mozart's Sonata in A minor, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, and Prokofiev's Toccata in D minor, a challenging lineup that showcased both technical skill and emotional range. Dr. Abernathy pushed her relentlessly, demanding more with each lesson. But now, instead of focusing solely on technical perfection, he continually brought her back to the heart of each piece. "What is Bach trying to say here?" he would ask. Or, "Find the humor in this Mozart passage." Or, "Don't just play the notes of the Prokofiev, feel the rhythm in your body." Sometimes, when she became too caught up in the mechanics of a difficult section, he would stop her and say simply, "Remember the Chopin prelude," and she would close her eyes, take a deep breath, and reconnect with that feeling, the pure communion between herself, the composer, and the music. Slowly, her confidence grew. The anxiety that had nearly derailed her career began to recede, though it never disappeared completely. There were still moments of doubt, still days when her hands shook and her mind raced with worries about failing. On those days, she would often find the janitor, whose name, she learned, was Mr. Nowak, polishing the brass handrails in the recital hall or washing windows in the practice building. His gentle encouragement and stories about his mother's love of music always seemed to center her, to remind her why she played. "My mother used to say that music is the language of the soul," he told her once. "When words fail, music speaks." The night before they were to leave for New York, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her narrow dorm bed, her mind racing through her program, imagining all the ways she might fail on the bigger stage. What if the judges weren't moved by her playing? What if they preferred Pavel's technical brilliance? What if she froze again, undoing all her progress? At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and slipped out of the room, careful not to wake Zoe. She made her way to the student lounge in the basement, drawn to the old upright piano where she had found her breakthrough with the Chopin prelude. The lounge was deserted, the campus quiet in the pre-dawn hours. Mei Lin sat at the piano, its familiar chipped keys a comfort under her fingers. Without turning on the lights, she began to play, letting her fingers find their way through the darkness. She started with the Bach, feeling its mathematical precision, the way each voice in the fugue conversed with the others, then the Mozart, with its classical balance and unexpected emotional turns, then the Chopin, stormy and passionate, building to its thunderous conclusion. As she played the final piece, the Prokofiev Toccata, with its driving rhythm and percussive energy, she felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were both performer and listener, both inside the music and outside it. When she finished, she sat in the darkness, breathing hard, her hands tingling from the workout. That was something else. Mei Lin jumped, startled by the voice. Dr. Abernathy stood in the doorway, a travel mug of coffee in his hand. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know it's late or early, I guess. I couldn't sleep." He waved away her apology and sat in an armchair across from the piano. "Pre-competition jitters. Perfectly normal. Were you listening long?" "Long enough." He sipped his coffee. "You've come a long way in 6 weeks. Do you think I'm ready?" The question had been burning inside her for days. Dr. Abernathy considered her for a long moment. "Technically, yes, your program is solid. You've mastered the notes, the rhythms, the dynamics," he paused. "But that's not what you're really asking, is it?" Mei Lin shook her head. "What if I get up on stage and can't find that feeling again? What if I just play notes, not music?" "That," he said quietly, "is the eternal question every performer faces. There are no guarantees, Mei Lin. No magic formula for connecting with the music every time." He leaned forward. "But I've watched you these past weeks. You're not the same pianist who froze on stage last semester. You found something, or perhaps remembered something, that most musicians spend a lifetime seeking. His words should have been reassuring, but Mei Lin still felt the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. Dr. Abernathy smiled, surprising her. Fear means you care. The trick is not to eliminate fear, but to make friends with it. To let it remind you what matters without letting it control you. The next morning, a small group from Westridge Conservatory boarded a train for New York City. The 3 student competitors, Dr. Abernathy and Professor Liu, who was serving as a chaperone. Pavel sat by himself, earbuds in, reviewing scores. The other student, a graduate pianist named Thomas, chatted easily with the professors. Mei Lin gazed out the window as the landscape rushed by, trying to quiet her mind. In her bag was a good luck charm, a small jade elephant her grandmother had pressed into her hand before she left for the conservatory. For strength, she had said, and for wisdom. Mei Lin touched the elephant through the fabric of her bag, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. New York overwhelmed her with its size, its noise, its endless energy. Taxi horns blared, people rushed along crowded sidewalks, buildings stretched toward the sky like mountains of glass and steel. The competition was being held at a famous concert hall, its ornate interior a stark contrast to the modern city outside. During the orientation session, Mei Lin learned that she would be performing on the second day of the 3-day event. 60 young pianists from around the world would play for a panel of distinguished judges, including famous concert pianists and conservatory directors. Only 10 would advance to the finals. That night in the hotel room she shared with another competitor, a friendly girl from Seoul, Mei Lin called home. Her grandmother answered, her voice warm and familiar despite the distance. Mei Lin, how is New York? Are you eating enough? Mei Lin smiled, some of her tension easing at the sound of her grandmother's voice. New York is big, and yes, I'm eating. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Yes, she admitted. Very nervous. Good, her grandmother said, echoing Dr. Abernathy's words from the night before. A little fear keeps us humble. But remember, no matter what happens, we are proud of you, not because you play piano well, but because you put your heart into it. Tears pricked at Mei Lin's eyes. I miss you, grandmother. I miss you too, little one. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you will play beautifully. But sleep proved elusive once again. Mei Lin lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city outside her window. In her mind, she ran through her program over and over, imagining her fingers on the keys, hearing the music in her head. When dawn finally broke, she felt exhausted but strangely calm. Whatever happened today, she would play with everything she had. No hiding, no holding back. The competition venue buzzed with nervous energy. Young pianists warmed up on practice pianos in small rooms throughout the building. Parents and teachers offered last-minute advice and encouragement. Volunteers with clipboards directed competitors to their assigned locations. Mei Lin was scheduled to play at 2:15 p.m. As the time approached, she found a quiet corner backstage where she could focus. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, centering herself the way her grandmother had taught her. 5 minutes, Miss Chen, a volunteer said, touching her shoulder gently. Mei Lin nodded, her heart pounding. As she stood waiting to be called to the stage, she felt a presence beside her. Dr. Abernathy had appeared, his face serious. Remember, he said quietly, you're not here to win a competition. You're here to speak through music, to connect. He squeezed her shoulder once, then was gone. Mei Lin Chen, representing Westridge Conservatory, the announcer called. Walking onto the stage of the grand concert hall was like entering another world. The space was enormous, the ceiling high above her, the rows of seats stretching back into shadowy distance. The Jew,